Okay, I'm just going to close everything. Okay, should be working. Let's see. Right, I'll just quickly introduce you. I'll ask anyone in the chat room, if they can just let us know if you can hear us okay. If someone could send us a message, that would be useful. Welcome to Truth Sentinel, Kate. It's good to see you. Where are you on the way to at the moment, by the way?
Thank you for having me, and from beautiful Thailand. I think I'm supposed to say thank you. Is it Kop Kum Ka or Kop Kum Kop?
It's for hello. For hello, it's Sawadee Cup. Sawadee Cup for hello. Then it's Kop and Cup for a man, and then Kop and Ka for a woman. Yeah.
Yeah. For a woman to say thank you. So Kop Kum Ka.
They always say Ka at the end of everything.
Through the beautiful. I'm driving through the beautiful Ashdown Forest, which is Winnie the Pooh country. This is where inspired Winnie the Pooh stories. So I've been walking on the forest with our dogs, my friend. We do it every day, all different areas. And this is better signal. I don't have good Wi-Fi in my house, and I don't want good Wi-Fi. And I have even less good Wi-Fi at the moment, because I think the little minions at the top are making sure life is pretty tricky for me at the moment.
Yeah, are you ready for lockdown? That's happening tomorrow, right?
Well, I don't believe in lockdown. Do you mean lock up, where they lock us all up in our homes?
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
I can honestly say I don't think I ever did it. It's unlawful. It's not it's unconstitutional. It goes against our Bill of Rights. It's certainly on the back of what? And so am I ready for my tyrannical government to go above and beyond the powers that we, the people, bestowed upon them when we voted them in? If you do indeed believe that we have a true and democratic society, am I ready for the police, the civilians in uniform, working on the tyrannical requests of a government when they are actually civilians in uniform of the people, for the people? Am I ready for all that? Should we ever be ready for it? No, hell no.
No, we shouldn't. And I think I'm the same as you. I don't try to obey any of the rules. But then at the moment in Thailand, the rules have been relaxed a lot over here. But some people follow all these rules to the letter. You hear people online discussing, oh, they told us we can't see members of 2 other families. And some of the rules are getting ridiculous now.
Well, you know, it's like it's an abusive relationship. It's when you agree to one demand, tomorrow there'll be 2 demands. And this is a test. It's to see if you acquiesce. When you think that a very small minority are managing to completely overpower entire towns and cities, and when in history have we seen that before? Well, we certainly saw it with people being put onto cattle trucks or taken off out of their villages and shot, or, you know, guided into showers. And actually there was very true statements made by some guards where they said, well, people deserve to die because they didn't fight back. And I suppose a lot of people, some of it is cognitive dissonance. They, I don't believe they can see it, but also some of it is that absolute belief that if you do it, do as you're told, then it will get better, which I've spoken a lot about. The Red Army torture tactics were very successful, and they used a very simple tactic, and they were the most successful in torturers in crushing their prisoners. And they used a tactic which is talked about on Amnesty International, if anyone wants to go and look this up, not making it up off the top of my head. And they used a tactic called the 3 Ds, and it was disability, dependency, and dread. And if you look at what's actually happening to us, and I'll talk about in the UK, we're being told that we're all disabled, we're dirty, we're virus ridden, we're disease spreaders. It's our fault. We must comply to stop this. If we don't, it's going to keep spreading. We're dependent because people are using a furlough system. We're dependent on the government to tell us what we can do next. We're dependent on them for our money coming in. for being told that you can have mortgage holidays. We're waiting, and then we're dreading, because constantly the mainstream media, who are just, pimping for a tyrannical government, are literally terrorizing the public. They're terrorizing them to the point so they're now dreading what's coming next. It's literally fear porn. And if you look up the terrorist act with intent to commit genocide, if you go and look it up, and then if you actually if you look at the news, I don't watch the TV anymore. It's the idiot's lantern, and it's very different to what's actually going on. We were in Trafalgar Square with 40,000 people on the 29th of August, and probably about 30,000 people thereabouts, 20 to 30,000 people on the 19th of September, and that wasn't even shown as that in the mainstream media. So the other night, I switched on the news, and they had a man who was clearly working in a mortuary, and this was at peak showing times. This wasn't after the watershed, and they were wheeling out a dead body on a gurney. Now, I've seen a lot of dead bodies. It doesn't bother me. I've seen them as they die. I've seen traumatic deaths. So I've seen people with, limbs missing. I've seen a lot of horrible things. But for the common man in the street to see a pair of feet sticking out the end of a sheet on the end of a trolley, and to be told that's a dead body, and then they're talking about how it's going to be embalmed because this person's died of COVID-19, ready for burial. That's quite traumatic to people, because they'll then be like, oh my gosh, that's a dead body. That's going to happen to me if I don't comply. But I just want to say this, people, whoever watched that, we were told, the World Health Organization said that if you died of COVID-19, you weren't to have an autopsy, you weren't to be embalmed, and you were to be bag tagged and burned, incinerated. So do you see, this is all fear porn. It's fear porn to make you comply. And there was nothing on that news segment, nothing that was nice. It was all deaths are rising, COVID-19, more and more people being admitted to the hospital with COVID-19. Now, this time of year, I worked in A&E years ago. We would be chocker with, it was the busiest A&E in Europe. I worked in there for 5 years. We were chocker with flu, asthma, cardiopulmonary disease, complications of diabetes. There was children coming into pediatric A&E. There would be, with breathing problems. This was all typical of this time of year. Then you've got your usual accidents, injuries and illnesses. You're not seeing any of that. It's all COVID-19. And I will say, we have whistleblowers under, I work with Dr. Kevin Corbett, and we are the medical revolutionaries. And a particular whistleblower that's just come to me, and I won't say where she worked, but she's a senior nurse in a trauma department. And she told me that when children come in, they're testing the relatives as well. And one relative had a test and was very angry because it was positive, and she was asymptomatic, no symptoms, wasn't ill. And so they did another test immediately because she created such a storm about it. A test was then negative. A couple of days later, or about a week later, she had to go back in as a child. And on the system, it said that she was COVID-19.
So they put it down as positive.
What they're doing is they're not only testing the patients, they're testing the relatives. And we've got to remember that this is a PCR test. It was never a diagnostic tool, and it was never to be used on its own. It was to be used in conjunction with symptoms. And so now you have people being tested using a tool that's not a diagnostic, that's looking for a particular gene sequence that's found in all Homo sapiens, in our factor 8. So everyone's a winner. And then there's no gold standard, which means you get some will test positive, the majority, but then you'll get some negatives. And if I'm explaining what's a gold standard, it means that whenever you have a test, you have to have a gold standard to put everyone against it. So if you had 10 schools, and in 10 schools, 10 children were taking a maths test, in order for them to all be marked equally, and for it to be fair, and to have a true result. You would have one set of answers that all of those 10 schools would be marked against. Well, that's not happening. There's no gold standard with the PCR test. So it's all different labs doing different amplifications. So this is why
Yeah.
it gets the variant.
I just wanted to mention some of the things you said. You mentioned before about what this is kind of like an abusive relationship. And I actually looked online on the government's own website and also charity guidelines for abusive relationships. And the things they list are isolation from families, curfews, saying who you can meet and when, telling you what to wear, i.e. masks, depriving you of essential needs, monitoring what you say and checking your social media, and depriving you of medical services. Those are all the things on the government website that are signs of an abusive relationship. It's
Absolutely,
pretty...
and that's what we're in. That's exactly what we're in. It's an abusive relationship. And, you know, when you look at what they're doing now, it's a carrot on a stick. So we're you know, if you do this, you good little minions, you'll get released for Christmas. And we know not to trust the lying lies of lies, because with the last flatten the curve, we were still there all through summer. And now it's a circuit breaker. Now, if this were a virus, a pandemic that was going to risk killing you, would you wait till Thursday and give people a few days to decide whether they're going to acquiesce? Are they
not if it's a deadly disease.
Exactly.
I wanted to mention you mentioned about the asymptomatic situation. I think this is key to the whole thing. I checked also the percentage of people that without symptoms, like they show these rising infection rates, and it seems to be that about 75% of people don't have symptoms from some of the studies that have been shown. So that means that 75% of the infection rates are people with no symptoms who are passing it on to other people, allegedly, who then also don't have no symptoms. So it's almost like an invisible disease that doesn't affect people, right?
That does nothing. Less than 1% death rate. And what's the average age? 84, is it? I can't remember. It's old. With comorbidities. So it does nothing. So, you know, I know, for talking's sake, I've read well and beyond that. You know, I'm of the opinion you don't catch a virus. But let's just go through that a minute. If I've got a cold sore, when that cold sore, which I get, which is herpes simplex 1, if I get one up my nose, which is where I tend to get them, or I'll get them in my ear, the first sign that I don't feel well is I'll have a chill and I'll have an itch in my ear and I'll have a headache, and it's a really different kind of headache, and I'll feel a bit like I'm foggy brained, a bit lethargic. That is a sign that you're going to be sick. You've got an active virus. Actually, if you don't want to believe the Rockefeller thing, then you would say that's when you're really toxic and your exosomes have come out your cells and they're having a cleanup. So if you're not sick, you're not at risk. As far as I'm concerned, in all my nursing career, we never did that. When someone was contagious, you isolated them and you barrier nursed and reverse barrier nurse, depending on whether they had no immunity and you didn't want to give them germs, or they were contagious and you didn't want to bring their germs out. So going back onto that, this deadly pandemic, if everybody's wearing the masks, and we know that viruses are smaller than nanoparticles, they go straight through the fibers of a mask. So your mask's doing nothing. If you really wanted to stop anything spreading, you'd have a full hazmat suit on and a big respirator mask. So your dirty, stinky rag that's over your mouth that you're touching everything else, touching it again, touching everything else, it would be so contaminated that you would need to have clinical waste bins everywhere and yellow clinical waste bags. They're the ones that we see in hospital, clinical waste sharps boxes. All these things have bodily fluids in, these yellow bins and bags and boxes, and they are collected by clinical waste companies and they are incinerated. So how come we've got nothing like that for these dirty, disease-ridden reservoirs that people are wearing across their mouths? Now, the wearing of the mask was not a sage order. It was given by the government, so it wasn't based on science. It was a political decision. And then we had Dr. Fauci saying, well, it's not really backed, about science, but it's a sign of respect. Well, I don't need to wear something over my air holes that's going to exponentially increase my risk of a bacterial lung infection, lower my oxygen, increase my carbon dioxide, make me anxious, and activate my own coronaviruses to look after somebody else, really? And when I nursed, we've moved away from these Nightingale wards because it's much easier to nurse somebody who's infectious with individual rooms and bathrooms. So why would we have Nightingale wards? Excuse me for 2 minutes. Am I coming in? Yeah, I was coming in for a green tea afterwards. Do you want to get the dogs? So it's my bubble. Why would we have Nightingale wards? Think about this logically, people. They've got all these Nightingale wards in the UK with all these beds and ventilators. Now, let's say that somebody is infectious, they're contagious, they're in there on a ventilator. How are they ever going to get well and get out? Because the people at either side of them are also contagious. So how are you ever going to say that they've been quarantined from those that are sick? You would just keep having cross-contamination. So it begs to question, does anyone ever leave there for, is anyone ever going to survive that? And
well, the Nightingale Hospital, a lot of people said hardly anyone went there anyway. In fact, there was one lady in the media who said that she'd been working there, and that she'd been having to contact lots of people, loved ones, to tell them that people had died. And then when the presenter challenged her and said, "But we heard it was closed because no one's there," she then changed the subject, and it was obvious that she'd made a mistake. She wasn't there because apparently there wasn't many people who actually went to that Nightingale Hospital.
Well, I had a guy from the military contact me, and he worked with bioweapons, and he was responsible for one of the ones to build the Nightingale Hospital. And he said to me, it doesn't make sense. Exactly what we just talked about having somewhere that is individual rooms. Why would you put them all in one great big hangar? It doesn't make sense. And also, in New York as well, why would you ventilate when it was the wrong treatment? And all of those patients died, except for the one that pulled his ET tube out. And then the minute, of course, you ventilate someone, there was an electrician contacted me, a whistleblower, and he got really scared. He didn't want to speak to the barrister. But he said to me, he saw a man being brought in who was talking on a trolley, and then they sedated and put him on the ventilator. Now, as I understand it, when you go on a ventilator, it's when you're not adequately perfusing the body with oxygen. So they put you on a ventilator to do it. Like if you've got a head injury, or if you've had an accident, or you've had surgery, and they need to put you onto a ventilator. But when you put an ET tube in on anybody, you've immediately got a portal, direct access for infection, and this is where you see them getting vent pneumonia. None of it makes sense. And I've heard all these people come out and say, "Oh, she's not a nurse." Well, you know what? Yes, I am a nurse. 35 years. And I'd worked in aesthetics and nutrition for the last decade. It doesn't mean I've forgotten everything that I've learned. And also, I would go as far as to say, and I was also a prescriber. So I understand drugs, but I understand how to heal the body from nutrition. I'm quite anti-pharma, unless it's emergency drugs. There's a place for them, but certainly not degenerative care. It's all drugs, and a lot of these diseases weren't there before the Industrial Revolution. And also, the nearer you get near the equator, you don't have them. This is all a toxic environment, toxic food, toxic water. So, there's an argument for all of that. Well, you only have to, what they're saying, vitamin D. Every single cell in our body has the vitamin D receptor. It's actually a hormone. And the mitochondria, the little powerhouses inside the cell that make the fluid, you need vitamin D for that. And you also need the electrical field in the daytime from the sun to make that fluid. So why would you lock everyone in their house?
Yeah, that doesn't make sense. That seems so obvious. Let me ask you. You mentioned the idea that perhaps this disease doesn't even exist. What's your opinion on the Wuhan lab? People saying that there could be a bioweapon that was created there. Do you think there could be the possibility that maybe all the numbers are being exaggerated, and obviously you've got the faulty test, but there could be a disease as well that they give to specific people like celebrities or because there seems to be an inordinate amount of celebrities that catch this and or government ministers.
When your star fades, you've got COVID-19. When it came out of Wuhan, that's when I started to look at it, and I was very quick off the mark at researching, and I was doing a local radio that I'd done for 3.5 years. And before even lockdown, I started to talk about, I went onto the websites, I went onto the Chinese public health website, and all of what I'm saying to you now, I referenced it. It's all evidenced, and I got kicked off the radio, and they were threatened with a fine, and I was on the front page of the Guardian way before anybody was really talking about it. I'm not saying I was doing it first. I don't really care about that. My point being, this is what I found, that Wuhan had mandatory vaccines from December of 2019. That's the first thing to remember. Sorry, China had mandatory vaccines from December of 2019, and included on their schedule, I believe the flu vaccine was included on there, but certainly all the other vaccines are on there with the same suspects in them, for sure. Wuhan itself had been a test city for 5G from the autumn of 2019. And you can go and find that. That was on the telecommunications website. That was all there as well. So when I saw people falling over in the street, now let's assume that was real and not propaganda. I've never seen anyone in my career suddenly get flu and fall over and die there and then. It tends to be a downward spiral, maybe 48 hours, the breathing might become more difficult. But what I did know from reading about this electromagnetic pulsed radiation, and I've read a lot about it, I've read masses, very little studies have been done from 60 gigahertz and up. There's a lot of military papers, and I read about how it affects when it goes through, how it affects oxygen. It absorbs oxygen. Well, that would make sense, and how your oxygen can't bind to your hemoglobin. That's the little protein portion of your erythrocytes, your red blood cells. So when you breathe in, your oxygen, it goes through your lungs, single-celled wall, binds to the hemoglobin, it's carried to all your cells. And that's why when people have got low iron, which is your hemoglobin, they feel tired, they feel out of breath. So this is one of the things I'd read, it stops that. So what I saw was people just not being able to breathe and fall over. Now, when I worked for BA for 10 years and we used to do our safety and emergency procedures, we were always told, if the oxygen mask drops down, well, when you travel, you put your own mask on first and breathe. It's the action of pulling it down which releases the oxygen. We all know that if we've flown. Then you help friends and family members. And the rationale for that is because I can't remember the exact amount of time, whatever it is, 17 seconds. It's not very long. It's the amount of time it takes for oxygen to get to your brain. And I know that your systemic circulation, your entire blood in your body, filters through the liver every 3 minutes. So I know that, going back to that, if you can't breathe in a decompression on an aircraft, very quickly, within about 5-6 seconds, you can't even coordinate your finger onto your nose. And that's why you're told to put your own oxygen mask on first before you help relatives. Otherwise, you'll be trying to help them and you won't be able to coordinate. So I was thinking about this, thinking about what I'd read on the telecommunications site, thinking about all of what I'd read about 5G, 4G, 3G, 2G, Professor Moskulu, Dr. Barry Trower, Dr. Catherine Horton. I'd read all this. Ionizing radiation, non-ionizing radiation, military papers. So thinking about that, I watched these people in Wuhan and I thought, I could hypothesize that maybe they're getting hit with some radiation, electromagnetic pulse radiation, and they can't breathe. Now, I can't say that for sure unless I saw, their blood results, their chest x-rays, autopsies. I couldn't say that, but I was hypothesizing based on that. Well, of course, that made me a conspiracy theorist. Of course it did. They all want to paint me as a conspiracy theorist. But I'm sure it's becoming very evident as I talk to you that I'm not that. I'm very science-based. I'm evidence-based.
Let's talk about that because, I've seen you a lot in the early days of the pandemic. I think a lot of people did, and then more recently, I saw your son's interview in the on the BBC and on the Daily Mail. I was going to ask you about the 5G thing. Like, I'm open-minded to that, and I think people should be able to discuss it. And I've read about 5G and the radiation, and it could be a weapon. But how do we know it? How do we know it definitely is? How do we know that's being used and that is what this virus is? Maybe we don't.
Well, first of all,
Yeah, what's your opinion on that?
I've never said this is 5G. What I've said is, going back to what you asked me a few minutes ago, there are many bioweapon labs everywhere. There are many genetically modified organisms being created in labs. There's a lab called acegen.com, ACCEGEN.com. Please, all your listeners, go on and have a look at it. They buy viruses, funguses, mold, immortalized cell lines, aborted fetuses, and they splice things. You can buy these products from them, and a lot of these bio labs are genetically modifying viruses where they're putting two things together. They're joining two viruses together. They're attaching them to genes. Now, where's evidence that we know this happens? Well, look at Monsanto. They made genetically modified foods, and when the insects land on them, they get holes in their abdomen. When we eat those foods, we get holes in our gut. And last year, every year, there's been lots of near misses with these labs where there's been a risk of contamination from carelessness and also from accidents. And there's been lots of warnings. This has happened. The Centers for Disease Control have warned them. So this has happened. There are these labs. We know they're there, and this is going on. We know that SARS-CoV, the one that was made in the lab, when people were given that in a vaccine, it made them far more susceptible to having a much more profound effect from the natural SARS-CoV that they got, and they would get far more complications. So this is what's there. We know it's there. Going on to 5G as a weapon, my first thing is there's not been enough studies on 60 gigahertz and up. UNICEF actually came out and spoke about the effects of 2G and 3G in schools on children, and how they were deeply concerned because children are much more moist, their skin is much thinner, and they're far more susceptible to this electromagnetic radiation. And we know that. We know what happens when you put something in a microwave. So there hasn't been enough studies on it. And whenever you change the electromagnetic field, you will always get, don't take my word for it, folks. Please go and, I love researching and digging. When all the radar operators, when radar first came in, all of those operators got sick, all of them. That was just with radar. So now we don't just have 5G coming along, we have 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G, then is something completely different. Now, then one could then say, if this was a pandemic and it was such a terrible time and people couldn't go to work, people losing their jobs, people using food banks, if we only had essential workers, how come telecommunications were still putting in fiber optics and whacking up cell towers? Was that essential work then, was it? Why did we need that? I mean, they were literally going up everywhere overnight. And there is definitely something in it. The fact that you're not allowed to talk about it, the fact that you're not allowed to talk about paedophilia, the fact that you're not allowed to talk about what's in the new mRNA vaccine. You talk about any of those things, it's the fastest way to travel, remote control. You'll be off everything really quickly. And,
yeah, I know. I think that's totally wrong. Let me address.
You're over the target. You're over the target.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. But let me address some of the things your son said in that article. He said, "Who benefits from this?" So, who would you like?
Look,
what's the point of this pandemic?
First of all, I want to say this because this is my son. He went to Eton as a scholar, very intelligent young man. That's where Boris Johnson went, for everyone who doesn't know. That's where all your world leaders' sons go. This is where anyone who's the top companies, CEOs, their sons go to Eton. It's a very different kind of school. He then went to LSE, London School of Economics, to do politics, economics and philosophy. He was in Speaker's Corner. He had a press pass. He's quite well known, been interviewed by Delingpole. He was on the BBC on the MASH report. He's doing, it's a Conservative. So what the BBC contacted me about, interestingly, was exactly what was written on my phone, my texts. And now, who approached who, I don't know, but my son may be articulate. Yes, he is. He's a beautiful young man to look at. He is very nice for the camera to look at. He's also incredibly intelligent, yes, but he's only 21. And right now, he doesn't know. He's not. I don't, it's every generation thinks they're smarter than the one that came before and the one that came after. Armies choose young men between 14 and the mid-20s because they're invincible. They think they're invincible. It's normal. But he's 21. He's a young man, and he's being manipulated because he's going to forever be known. Even in politics, can you imagine he's running for politics? Don't vote for him. He's the young man that sold his own mother. And I just would like to say as well, yeah, not even sold your granny, he sold his mother. Now, I have another son, and he's quoted that my son contacted him and said this, this, and this, and my son didn't. And he said, I don't agree with what he said, and I'll be telling him. So, the BBC, this is disgusting. It's very underhand to use one's children. It's a real dirty smear. But my son will ultimately be the victim in this. I'm 55. I'm a Christian. I don't care. I speak the truth and nothing but the truth. So when I die, I know where I'm going. I'll stand in judgment. That's my beliefs. I have strong Christian faith. And thank God I've got that. And it came to me in the last couple of years, and it's wonderful. God knows every hair on my head. But this is my son. He's 21. And if he wants to go in politics, who will trust someone that does that? Who's going to trust someone? This will bite him on the ass his entire life.
Maybe it's the perfect qualification to work in politics.
Well, politics is Hollywood for ugly people. So
do you think part of the problem is his education? The education system teaches us to comply. It rewards people who do things in the correct way, in the certain way they're told. Those are the people who get the A's. If you write an essay in a different way, you're going to get a D. Do you think that is actually part of the problem, the education system?
Well, I have a bit of experience about that. That very son, when he was in his grammar school, when he was doing his GCSE coursework, he wrote us an essay. And it was the reasons for why did the Second World War begin? And he used his dad's books, all about, the oil changing from coal to oil, the pipelines coming across Europe, Mesopotamia. He wrote the truth, and we were told it wasn't the curriculum, and he'd been marked down for it. So we all know that history is whoever writes it. And if you look at history books that were written certainly before the First World War, you'll get a very different account of history. As for saying I was a conspiracy theorist and I used to, showed him videos, it's complete nonsense because I didn't know anything about it. I was a full-time mummy. It was later that his dad got really into, his dad worked in banking, a very intelligent man, but he got into reading all about the history of banking, the history of wars, the Committee of 300, the Rothschilds. He was the one who got into it all. I found the books fascinating, incredible. It was an eye-opener. But my interest was very much in the history of the medical system. And I did come across the book, Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. I read the Committee of 300. I used to read his books. I was doing the Gerson therapy from 2012 to 2014 because I had cancer. Actually, the BBC interview was really interesting. The woman said, and then she got cancer and she chose a natural treatment which gave her comfort. No, love, it gave me life because I'm still here 9 years on, cancer-free, without recurrence. And that in itself should have been a smoking gun for everyone watching that interview going, hold on a minute. She had cancer 9 years ago and turned down chemo and radiotherapy and tamoxifen and she's still here. What did she do? There's an interview they should be doing. Incidentally, I did do an interview. What doctors don't tell you. Anyone wants to go and see that interview, it's out there. What doctors don't tell you, how I beat breast cancer. Please go watch it if you want to know what I did.
Do you think people are becoming disillusioned with the whole medical profession, big pharma companies? I mean, the World Health Organization, I don't trust anything they say anymore. Do you think that's a good thing, or we should listen to them about some stuff?
What, when it's ran by Tedros the terrorist, once on the most wanted list for crimes against his own people? Really? He's not even a medical doctor. I personally don't trust anything that comes out of them.
Nor do I.
All of those. And, you know, I want to see evidence. I want to see evidence of a pandemic. I want to see a real test. I'm seeing the economy being completely ruined. I'm seeing people's businesses going under. There's a lot of mistrust in the hospitals, the hospitals, as I've called them. And we know this is correct because the Queen's Nursing Institute did a survey, which was reported on in the mainstream media, that there was indeed a blanket do not resuscitate across the UK. If you want to have a do not resuscitate on a patient, you have to have the permission of the patient, consent, or the consent of the relative, or whoever has legal responsibility for that patient. So be it power of attorney, whatever it is. And so on the 29th of April 2020, NICE, the National Institute for the Centres of Excellence, gave the doctors and nurses the authority that any patient who is critical frailty score 6 and above, who cannot meet their own life goals, well, that might be a patient who needs help with washing and dressing, shopping. So that might be an adult with learning disabilities or physical disabilities, or they've had a stroke or anything like that. Or maybe they've got terminal cancer, but it might be terminal cancer as in they might live for a couple of years. My children's godfather had terminal cancer for 6.5 years before he died, and he didn't even die of cancer. So, but if they're sick and they can't, they're going to remove all medical treatment. Well, what's medical treatment? Food, water, essential medications. And in this survey that was done by the Queen's Nursing Institute, staff came out and said they're starving patients. They're removing their food, and they didn't want to talk about it. They're frightened to come out. And the nurse was telling me, and quite a few have actually told me, they've been told to sign documents to stay quiet. They're being threatened they'll lose their jobs. Well, I don't know what you call that out there. I call that murder. I call that genocide. And we do know that our elderly deaths were up during lockdown, and the sales of morphine and midazolam increased. Midazolam is a sedative. Morphine is used as a painkiller, off-licensed. It can make your respiration shallow. It depresses your hypothalamus. Your respiratory center is in your hypothalamus. So it makes your breathing less and shallow. And that's why we see our patients on end-of-life care. They'll be given morphine and midazolam, often in these syringe drivers, to keep them pain-free and comfortable. Well, you're getting people treated with that as opposed to treated with what they need. And then it was leaked out of a hospital recently, a hospital trust, that people over 45 weren't going to be resuscitated. Now we're told...
Wait, now that's serious. That includes me now.
Well,
but that kind of reminds me...
That's quite interesting. That's quite interesting what you've just said.
I was only joking, by the way. Of course.
I know. I understand that, sir. But this is human instinct. Until it affects us personally, we very often will do nothing. So I actually spoke to a couple of people who are quite wealthy. They've got no mortgage. And I was talking to them about this, and they're in their late 60s. And I asked them, how did they feel about it? And they said, well, it doesn't really affect us. We've got no mortgage. And you see, it doesn't affect them. And I said, so how old are you? And I said, oh, well, it's going to affect you if you get sick, because you're not going to be for resuscitation. If you get cancer, which you're more likely to as you get older, you're not going to be treated, because we were told cancer treatments would be stopped until they'd got coronavirus under wraps. Well, with the crappy PCR test, it's not a diagnostic. Everyone's a winner, baby. Looking for your own sequence, your own genome sequence, factor 8, which is found in all Homo sapiens. Well, that means we're never going to get rid of it. Everyone's going to have it. The more people you test, the more positives you are going to get. So
it's going to go on for it. It is going to go on forever. In fact, when this first happened, I said to my friend, "This will go on forever." He was like, "Oh, it's going to be over in a couple of weeks because that's what they said at the beginning." I said, "No, because
that's what they told the people in the First World War."
Anyone who's kind of into conspiracies just knew straight away this is a big move, you know. But I wanted to. I mean, The do
I've
not
been reading about
resuscitate
this.
notices.
I'm just
Yeah.
going to move into the house, so I'm just going to go dark for a second.
Okay,
But
I'll just keep
I am
talking. I'll
listening.
keep talking while you're doing that. Yeah. Um,
Uh,
Talking about the do not resuscitate notices, it reminds me of the Liverpool care pathway where they did that as
that
well.
terrible thing.
Yeah, and so it does seem very evil, and there's no way to get around it. It is murder if you're, taking away food and water and letting people die, and that kind of moves us on to the depopulation agenda of this. And
Agenda 21, Agenda 30. We're seeing it play out everywhere. And, don't think, folks, that the Liverpool care pathway actually went away. It's still here. They're still doing it. They just changed it because people were taking food in to give their relatives, and people were recovering. I mean, when I worked in A&E, I remember a patient, and he was in resus, and then they moved him to clinic because he didn't die. He was kind of end of life. They moved him into resus, and he was still alive. Just moving from the noise. He was still alive, so they had to move him into clinics, and he still didn't die. And the next morning, we went onto one of the wards, and he was sat up in bed eating breakfast. So that Liverpool care pathway just was given a new name. It's still carried on, and this has been done. I saw my close friend. She went into a hospice. She was paralysed from the waist down in her 70s with a secondary tumour, and as soon as they started her on the midazolam and the morphine, I knew it would be about 48 hours. And it was. She was gone within 40. That's what they do. It's a chemical kosh. It's a nice way to go. I think if you're in pain, it has its place. It's wonderful. But I certainly don't think it has its place for people that, shouldn't be having treatment removed. And I do know of a lawyer who she very publicly came out, was crying, where people were coming to her, giving her testimonies. And I know I've heard, and my colleague, Dr. Kevin Corbett, we've heard some harrowing testimonies of patients that have one gentleman who was a retired GP, and the nurses literally stood there and made no attempt to resuscitate him. None at all. They just stood there.
I wanted to ask you about that because you were a nurse before. Why would the nurses do that? Okay, you are a nurse then.
Well,
why would nurses do that?
Well, I am a nurse. It doesn't matter whether I'm not on the register. I don't want to be on that corrupt common purpose ran by the government. It was taken over in 2001. What I have spoken to with a nurse who is working in A&E, she said, I don't understand it. These are her words. It's so weird. They know it's wrong. They can see it's wrong, but they just go, well, what can we do? And they just do it.
They're just following the rules, yeah?
They are. Now, we have to remember, we all have different abilities, different drives. I've always been a bit gobby. I don't like to call it gobby, actually. I've always been one that I don't like injustice. I can stand up in front of 100 people, 200 people, even as a much younger woman. If I didn't agree with something and I thought it wasn't right, I would stand up. If I saw someone being bullied, I'm quite happy to then go, well, at workplace bullying, I've seen it. I've seen workplace bullying take place, and I've taken on people. I'm going to tell you something really horrible, actually. And many, many years ago, when I was in my early 20s, I worked in a place and worked on a ward. And there was a sister in there, and she won't be with us anymore. She was giving a particular patient, she would threaten her and give her an injection of water as a compliance, sort of a coercion threat to get her to behave herself. And this patient wasn't written up anywhere in the nursing drug codex for an injection of water, an intramuscular injection of water. Clopixel, yes, which was a tranquilizer. And I actually said to her, that's not prescribed. Anyway, I swiftly moved out of that unit for a while. But this is what I'm saying, things like this have happened. They've happened through history. And we'd be liars if they say they don't happen now. Look at all the things we've seen happen in the past, and we have yet another inquest. It'll never happen again. And let's look back to the late 30s. What did we have there? The nurses of the Third Reich, who took the patients that were disabled, epileptics, gypsies, homosexuals, blacks, physically disabled, old, mentally disabled, and they would be taken from their families, go into the hospitals. Then after a few months, they would be moved to a different one. It was the nurses that murdered these patients, either by not feeding them, not giving them liquids, or giving them a cocktail of drugs that would kill them. And this is very famous. And those nurses stood trial after the war at the Nuremberg trials. They stood trial. They were called the nurses of the Third Reich. So to think that it doesn't happen and it can't happen and it isn't happening is naive. And so these, my little chihuahua's barking at me now. These nurses that do know it's going on and they're remaining cut off. If you've been complicit, if you're complicit, history shows us you're going to stand on your own because you will be tried. And the Nuremberg trials with the doctors, there was only, I can't remember the exact amount, I think there was only about 7 or 9 doctors were actually hung. The rest were all spirited out of Germany under Operation Paperclip and went to work for IG Farben and Bayer, the pharmaceutical companies, to continue the eugenics program. So nurses, you'll stand on your own. No one's going to be behind you. If you're doing things you shouldn't be doing. And, this nurse yesterday was telling me, and I've actually heard it from other nurses and porters, when all the food parcels were coming in to the hospitals, and this was an A&E department as well, the one yesterday, frontline, she said we were quiet, it was dead, and we were having all these food parcels coming in, and she said it was terrible to accept them, knowing that they were quiet and it was a lie. And then she said the nurses on the night shift were complaining about the nurses on the day shift, taking all the good bits. And I know a porter was telling me from another hospital that the nurses on the wards were fighting because the A&E ones were taking all the goods. Then if you went onto the NHS website, it had all these different discounts. I mean, I think Green Flag give free recovery to them. So that means that the NHS is now racketeering because they said, if you would like to donate, and you can advertise on the NHS site. So all these nurses and doctors were being given discounts for all different things. Domino's Pizzas, I believe, is 50% for emergency care workers when they were quiet. Now, I'm sure certain departments would still be busy. I know that the paramedics down in Holgate, one of them told me they were just as busy because there's a very old population in Eastbourne. So you're still going to get all the usual falling over, broken hip, heart attacks, strokes, etc. But everything else was quiet and the wards were empty. One COVID ward senior sister got in touch with me. She said, it's shocking. It's a lie. We're being made to lie. Now,
do you think this is kind of like that they like to turn people into heroes in like in the Second World War? They tell all the soldiers they're heroes. And in America, they always go, thank you for your service. It's kind of like making them feel good about doing bad things, maybe.
Well, we saw that. Everybody was, I just want to say, actually, I was told as well, they've been giving the nurses in one particular hospital, can only speak for this one because it was a whistleblower, they get a luncheon voucher of £6 something if they accept a flu vaccine. I tell you, no money in the world could make me accept a flu vaccine. But
let's talk about the vaccines. Let's talk about the vaccine.
Just asking you that question about.
Sorry, yeah.
We had the steel clap on a Thursday night where everyone had to go out and clap. No, and a lot of the paramedics that came to me and nurses, they were horrified. They were so embarrassed. But a lot of them, you saw them with all the police cars and the ambulances with their flashing lights on. They even had a singer on the grass of one hospital. So they get to have a party and they're all out there singing shoulder to shoulder, getting rounds of applause and preferential shopping. It was disgusting. And I'm sorry, there are lots of good nurses, but I also in my career met a lot of bad nurses and a lot of cruel nurses, a lot of deaf nurses who didn't hear for someone asking for the toilet. And that's fact. And we've seen that over and over again when we have cases where nurses abuse their power and then there'll be a hearing. And there was a lot of nurses, they were loving it. Suddenly, they were always classically underpaid. Well, I don't really find it that underpaid because they all own their own houses. A lot of them own 2 cars. So that's not underpaid. That's not a poor profession. I know professions where they can't even get through the week. They don't even have electricity on their electricity cards. So it's not that bad paid profession. But all of a sudden, after being told they won't be getting a pay rise, Boris is now saying they're heroes. Stay home, die, protect the NHS. Excuse me, Henri Bevin arranged the NHS. He was the one he wanted to have a healthcare system that was free at the point of source for everyone. He would turn in his grave. And now we're told, stay home, protect the NHS. I'm sorry, but we're paying for it. It's part of what we've all signed up for. Why do we need to stay home and protect it? It's
yeah, exactly. In some ways, people should get a refund because they're not getting the service. I wanted to mention something quickly about the obeying and compliance. Like, for me, when I heard about the clapping thing, automatically it feels wrong. It feels wrong. It's like, you don't tell me to go out and clap. But I think there are some people who don't feel that. They feel when they're told to do something, it makes them feel good that they're joining the crowd. And I think that's part of the problem with this whole situation, the mask wearing, the lockdowns. It's like there's some people who like to be controlled and some people don't. And I think that's the problem, the thing we have to bridge between people, I think.
Well, as human beings, it's our nature to not like change, to resist change. And the other thing is, it makes us very anxious when we can't plan, when we don't know what's coming. And that's a torture tactic, dread. We don't know what's coming. So we'll often give up all our everything. And that's what you're seeing, people giving up their civil liberties so they know what's coming, so they can plan. You know, if you all do lockdown like good little minions, you can have Christmas. So this is what's happening now. But also as well, we're all very different. There's a very famous video. It's on YouTube and it's called, I think it's called The Shirtless Man. And it's a festival, clearly, and it's a young guy doing a crazy dance on a hill and he's got his shirt off. And another young man comes and joins him. And they're dancing really wacky and people are looking at them, pointing and laughing. Then another man and then another woman come and join them. And before you know it, everyone goes to join them because suddenly they're going to be on the outside if they don't join the dancers, the shirtless man. Whereas before, they were on the outside. So there is that need to belong. It's like, children don't like to be seen as different. They like to blend. They like to be the same. They like to have what their peers have got. It's very important that they have the right gear on so that they match their peers. So there is that. People don't want to stand out. I was talking to a lovely lawyer today, and she was laughing at, the fact that I'd been arrested. And I went, yeah, whatever. I had a good sleep in the cell. And she said, oh gosh, I just want a quiet life. So she knows it's all a lie. And she knows it's all wrong, what's happening. But she wants a quiet life because
I think there's a lot of people like that. Yeah.
But we do have different abilities. We will have those that will lead. They'll be at the front going, come on, charge. And then we'll have the ones that will follow. But it only takes so many people, like the shirtless man dance. As soon as people start to see that people are going, well, I'm not going to do this, then more will follow. Well, if he's not going to shut down and lock up, I'm not going to. And then people will get courage from one another. And that is why, the ice bucket challenge, where
I hated that. That was another example. I hated that. It's like a compliance exercise, though.
Well, I was reading the reason for that, where they put it across all social media, was it was actually the CIA who devised it to see how quickly something would go across social media and how quickly we could get organized. So, so what you see is, people right now are being stopped from gathering. They're being stopped from communicating. And also today in Parliament, you've got Priti Patel. There's nothing pretty about that woman. But they're voting on that you cannot protest in groups larger than 2. Well, that goes against our Bill of Rights. That goes against the Constitution. That now means that we can't protest against a tyrannical government, which means this is not a democracy. It's not a democracy at all. And let's not call it one anymore.
People are going to ignore that anyway, though.
I'm sure they will, but the whole thing of the global financial reset and the leaked document that came out of Cairns that the Canadian politicians had. I haven't validated that. I don't know whether it's real. It seems quite legitimate. A lot of people are reporting on it. And it's stating that, they'll make things so bad for people, and it's going to get bad. Supermarkets are employing distribution marshals. What are they? What are they? They're ration marshals. It's just a different name. Distribution marshals. They're going to be checking your trolley to see how much you've bought. And then you've got, you've got all the same thing, the mask compliance tool. Now, those that don't wear a mask are frowned upon. It's almost like the Star of David. Those non-mask wearers are being identified as non-compliant. And even
though people who wear the masks know that it's not a deadly disease, you can tell. But I went in somewhere the other day without a mask, and I walked around, and then they told me to get out, and that I couldn't come in and do what I wanted to do unless I had the mask. So I went out. I did get a mask because I'm in Thailand, and you kind of have to for some things here. And I came back in, but the point was, like, I'd already been in there and infected everyone if there was a real disease, right? So everyone knows that it's not real, but they're just wearing them for compliance. But I wanted to ask you about the vaccines as well in a minute.
I authored a paper, and Dr. Corbett published it on his site about the three mask wearers. And of course, the first one is the one who believes it's a virus. The mask's the only thing that's protecting them, and they're going to die, and everyone's a risk to their mortality, and they're very dangerous. Now, the second mask wearers are those that have to wear it because it's policy, because it's their employment. And if they don't wear it, they won't be able to work, or they won't be able to travel. And they are very angry that they're having to wear it. Therefore, if they're having to wear it, you're going to wear it. So they're really angry, and they're more likely to be quite abusive and physically abusive. Now, they will empower group 1, and group 1 will empower group 2. Then you've got group 3 who know it's all a crock. They don't want to wear it, but they just do it for a quiet life. But they're not going to support you if you're getting battered for not wearing a mask or threatened. I've been threatened. So who is the most dangerous, and who do you approach here? Because it's embedded now. It's embedded about the mask. Which group do you need to change? You need to change group 1. And you need to change what they believe. And the only way we can change that is actually visually. We need to prove to them that this is not going to kill them, that it is safe to go without a mask. But it's so embedded now. And it wasn't a science-based decision. It came from the government, not SAGE. And it's not in the Coronavirus Act. Social distancing a mask isn't in that. So it's about challenging it. But it's interesting, the whole thing of wear a mask and you can't come in here without a mask. What we see is supermarket workers and restaurants and publicans actually speaking to people in a way that they wouldn't normally speak to them. They almost have got their little bit of power over others. And we see a very authoritarian stance coming out of some of them. And we, myself and my friend, we went to get a drive-through coffee, and because we'd asked for honey at the bottom or brown sugar at the bottom, and they said no, and I said why, and they said, oh, coronavirus. I said, what, it's transferred on a sachet of brown sugar now? So we were told by the manager in there to F off. Would any other time would a manager dare tell us to do that? He'd be concerned that he's going to be sacked. He'd lose his position. So what we see is it's very similar to what you see in Rwanda, in former Yugoslavia, in any war-torn country. There's never often enough military or police to commit all the atrocities. What you see is a lot of atrocities are committed by the people, neighbor on neighbor.
True. And I wanted to ask you, what do you think's coming? What over the next 6 months are the vaccines gonna be rolled out? Is 5G gonna be switched on? Is there a depopulation agenda? Is it gonna be a quick one, or is it gonna be gradually? Like, what do you see coming?
Well, I can only go, this is my opinion based on the evidence that I've read over the past 10 years and on what I'm seeing unfold in front of me. with the scientific evidence that is meant to back it up. So looking at the vaccine, it's like no other. It's never been done before. It's got no license, hasn't had the third phase of testing done where you give it and you watch them through 7 to 10 years to see what the effects will be. It hasn't had the gold standard done on it. It's not had double-blind placebo trials done. And if you're given the vaccine and you drop down dead there or a little bit later, there's no liability for the vaccine makers. They're training non-medical staff to give it, and there's no liability for them. So now you have an unlicensed vaccine. It's experimental. It's never been done before. There's no liability anywhere. And it's not had the test. It's been rolled out in spectacular speed. Are you going to do that? Are you going to actually have something injected into you that's going to keep replicating the RNA? And we don't even know how it's going to affect you. You've got 10 billion miles of DNA in your body. It's about 37,000 terabytes in there. If you take out just one gene, so 10 billion miles of genes, you take out one gene, or you put one in, or you translocate, you take a gene out of one place and put it in elsewhere, it's going to change who you are and have a profound effect. I think we are 98% the same as chimpanzees. So imagine you're going to take one gene out and put it elsewhere, or take one out altogether. Are we even going to be human if we reproduce when we've had that? Because this is an RNA vaccine. It's going to technically make you a genetically modified human being. Well, that would mean then that you're not of the creator. You could be patented. So that's what I think on that one. Do I believe it will be mandatory? I think they'll try, but I think they don't need to really upset everyone just yet. They can make it policy. So they've already told the nurses, frontline workers, and the police, they're all going to get it. So they'll make it policy. You can't work, you can't go to school, you can't go to university, just like in New York. It's mandatory vaccines, it's policy. So the children that are homeschooled haven't had vaccines. You can't travel, can't go on public transport. What comes next? You can't shop, you can't buy groceries, you can't buy food. I don't make any, secret of it that I'm a Christian. If you read Exodus, if you read the book of Daniel, if you read Revelation, it's all in there. You can't buy or sell goods without the mark of the beast. In Australia, it's being put through. They're trying to make it that, and this is in the British Medical Journal. Don't take my word for it. Please go look it up. That if you don't have the vaccine, then you can be given 5 years in prison, or you can be given or a fine of 666,000 Australian dollars. It's an interesting figure, that.
Patent number 060606 as well, from Microsoft, which is some kind of device which looks like it's going to be linked to a cryptocurrency. But with the vaccines, it's unlikely that people are going to get injected and then drop down dead, isn't it? It would be if it's going to be a slow process.
No, that's simply not true, because every year people do have vaccines and they do drop down dead. They have an anaphylactic reaction. Certainly, to date, the most dangerous vaccine is the HPV vaccine. Many girls have had it and literally collapsed and died. Flu vaccines, this happens. They've got, when you put aluminium, it goes through the blood-brain barrier, causes inflammation in the brain. Mercury, the same thing. Viruses, funguses, mold. Then, of course, in this vaccine is the immortalized cell lines. Diploid cells are immortalized cell lines. MRC5 from a male aborted fetus, WI38 from a female aborted fetus, they're found in the measles vaccine. They're immortalized cell lines. What does that mean? It means that the longer they go on in your body, they turn into a cancer. And if your immunity doesn't recognize that you've got damaged DNA and repair it, or cause apoptosis, cell death, that will divide. And then it will keep on dividing, and you'll have a palpable, detectable tumor. Where's our evidence of this, that cancer's rising? We now see 1 in 2 in the UK population get cancer in their lifetime. And the main charities, Cancer Research UK, Breast Cancer Now, state on their sites that by 2050, cancer will be 100% across the board. 100%.
Well, in some ways, I think that should be the amount of percentage increase in cancer since 1945. If people check the figures, it's amazing. People wouldn't even believe it. The increase has been colossal, thousands of percent. That should prove to people. That should prove to people that governments in general don't care about death rates. They don't really care about death rates, because if they did, they would have decades ago they would have tried to find out what the hell was happening. So I always think if you feel like the government is there to protect you and cares about death rates, you should know something's wrong from this pandemic, because governments have never cared about death rates. They don't particularly care. And I mean, some people believe there's a depopulation agenda. Why do you think the governments would want to cull the population?
I suppose if one was to go and read, a lot of books and look at, people talk about the Georgia Guidestones. If you look at Agenda 21, Agenda 30, you look at the Committee of 300, all these things I've read, they talk about the planet being overpopulated and wanting their green spaces back. You look at all that and climate change and global warming, and that's what it looks like. It looks like they're trying to, they being a very small minority, are wanting back the planet, the earth, whatever. And if you look at how will they achieve that, well, they're doing it. We know that geoengineering is real. Anyone that says chemtrails aren't real, they're just silly, really, because there's actually websites that show you who are geoengineering companies. They'll show you. The army have done it. It happens. They do spray. We see it all
it's
the time.
100% true. In Thailand, they sometimes there was a whole project to make it rain so that Thai farmers could have rain to grow the crops, and there was awards given over that. So it's definitely a thing.
Yeah, and that's what they do. I mean, there was that. I think it was in the 30s where they put sulfur up into the air. I think it was in Cornwall. It was somewhere, and they made it rain so much.
Somewhere in the UK, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was in the 30s. They made it rain so much, and the people that lived there actually said they could smell the sulfur. They could smell it, and they completely flooded the area, and the people had to be displaced. So there is talk, if you read Agenda 2130, not servicing rural areas, not having schools, not servicing the roads, and it will be that you have these big cities and not servicing the hospitals. And we see all the little cottage hospitals all disappeared. They've all gone. This has been going on for a while, and forcing people into big sprawling cities. The Strong Cities Alliance, you must have read what they are. Strong Cities Alliance, of course, Melbourne's on there. That's really interesting when I came across that. And I look back, my family are all in Australia, and I was looking at Adelaide and where my sister is, and Melbourne, where the rest of our family are. And there was a thing called the Lima Agreement years ago, which was set up to destroy the industry and break Australia, and that's what they've been doing. They've been taking all the industry out. And I had a big long discussion with my sister about it. It's been there for years, and she said, "Yeah, it is like that. All the car industry's gone." So this has been happening, and it's real, and it's not an overnight thing. So people might jump up and down and squeal if it was overnight, but they're doing it like a dripping tap. It's the whole. I don't like the analogy, the frog in the saucepan, where if you put the frog in the water and turn it on, it won't jump out. It'll only jump out if you put it in hot water. If you heat the water slowly, it will remain in the water and die. So we are seeing this. There's been leaked documents to UK Column that from the government saying that they were going to get rid of all of the council buildings and schools, and it would all be done online. I can see that happening.
I think over the next 6 months there could be like a stock market crash. Over here in Thailand, I look down the street, and I know in 6 months, pretty much every single business is going to be closed. A lot of them are trying to stay open, but there's no tourists here now. I'm pretty much the only one here almost, and I haven't got any money, so they're a bit disappointed when I turn up. But it's all going to be closed.
There's going to be Robin Tilbrook, chair of the English Democrats, was explaining to them that at least 70% of the conveyancing solicitors on the high streets will disappear. So all your small businesses are going to go bust. So what does that leave? It leaves big tech. It leaves the companies that you can only order from online, like Amazon. It leaves the big companies, and that's the plan. And if anyone thinks it's okay, or that's okay, at least we've got Amazon, one has to remember when Amazon began selling books, A lot of bookstores all over shut. They just closed down forever. And as soon as that happened and Amazon had a captive audience, they began to censor the books that you could actually access. So if Amazon can do it, what's going to happen when all your little shops are on your high street? Who's going to censor the food that you can access?
Censorship's becoming a huge issue, especially during the US election as well, when they shut down the New York Post Twitter page because of the Hunter Biden laptop. Which, when I talk to some of my friends, they don't know, they haven't seen any of the videos and the pictures on that laptop. It's like two societies. One half of society is seeing the real stuff, and the other half is just hearing about it and thinking it's a conspiracy. And do you think it's going to be possible to bridge that gap? You know,
I think that it's almost, you know, like when you watch, excuse me, I think when you watch programs on the TV, we know that they use product placement, and then people don't realize that they're actually seeing it constantly. So they then go and buy products because they are being conditioned softly. So I think what's happening is people are seeing this on the TV all the time, in the newspapers. I've got a really needy chihuahua here. Come here.
So you can join in if you want to.
There she is. That's Nelly.
Oh, very cute.
So she's been on the forest. So what's happening is people are seeing this all the time, and they're becoming. It's almost. This is my personal opinion. If you see it enough, you start to think it's real. So you remember the movie Wag the Dog? Where they
yeah, I didn't watch it. Yeah. I did watch a bit of it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Quite
boring, but it's very effective. You know, they convinced everyone indoors that there was a big disaster going on outside via the TV screens, and when the people stepped outside, it simply wasn't true. So this is really what happens. So when I was watching the TV, and like I say, and there was a dead body coming out of a room being embalmed, people die every day. It's normal. We're meant to die. We're born. We grow up, we die. You can't stop people. I never have I felt so safe, because you can only die of COVID-19 now. You can't die of old age. You can't get ran over by a bus, and you can't die of a heart attack. Because if you test positive, no matter what you've had, you'll go in the COVID statistics. It's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous.
That whole in the UK, we're terrible at family values. We don't look after our elderly. We bomb them in nursing homes. We not everyone, but the majority. If you look at Thailand, they have a very different way of taking care of their elders. And my ex-husband was Iranian. You know, the mother was the top of the family. And I remember my ex-husband's mother, her mother, my ex-husband's grandmother, lived a couple of weeks with each of her daughters. They didn't bung her in a home. She lived a couple of weeks with each to spread the care. And they all respected her and loved her. So what we see now is people only consumed with their own mortality, just themselves. They're only caring about themselves. I know I was reading one article, and then I've actually heard people tell me, one lady told me, fell over in a supermarket car park. One of the ladies was over 70, one was in her late 60s. No one helped pick them up. No one. Let me tell you, you have a cardiac respiratory arrest in front of me. I'm not just going to be standing there, and I'm not just going to be doing cardiac compressions. I'm going to give you 2 rescue breaths as well. And if you survive and you say I've given you COVID, too bad. But the point being, I'm not going to stand there and watch people. I'm going to help my fellow man. But people aren't. They're thinking it's all about just them. Well, you know what? If you think it's just you and it's just about your mortality, you're doomed. Because what's happening now is it's a totalitarian takeover. And unless we all stand together, and we very much, I wonder what's going to be left in 5 years. If the agenda, which I believe is unfolding now, is going to come to fruition, then I won't be here. The likelihood of all my children being here is very low. Now, people have said I'm a conspiracy theorist, and I shouldn't say that, but when I see that all treatment in hospitals is being removed,
screening programs are being removed, that people are not being able to buy food, and they're even talking now about a national salary. Well, hang on a minute, isn't that a bit like what they do in China? You know,
there does seem to be a big Chinese connection to this whole thing.
Yeah, when I see this, it does concern me. And I think it was, I can't remember where I got the exact information. I've read so much, and please forgive me. I'm sorry I can't say where this is from. But there was, I think it was a reporter, and he was talking about how 3 million telephones had just stopped being used in China. They hadn't been switched off.
I remember that.
They hadn't disappeared. They hadn't been disconnected or stopped their contract. They just stopped being used. Well, 1 or 2, but 3 million? Is that because they were dead? So
yeah,
that's very interesting.
But then again, there's lots of rumors spread around. I mean, how do you decide what is a potential false conspiracy theory and what is actually real?
Well, if we look at the term conspiracy theory, it was developed by the CIA. It was thought up by the CIA to discredit people that were speaking truth. And it's a bit of a dichotomy, isn't it? A conspiracy. What is a conspiracy? It's something to hide the truth. What's a theory? So the two words don't really go together. So to label someone conspiracy theory, what? Are we all conspiracy theorists? I know lots of doctors and scientists and lawyers and barristers and professors and immunologists and epidemiologists and engineers that are all saying exactly the same as what I'm saying. Are we all conspiracy theorists? Certainly we're going to all be labelled as dissidents. You know, you can't say all the people are wrong. And also, you know, 40,000 plus people in Trafalgar Square on the 29th of August, possibly 20 to 30,000 in Trafalgar Square on the 19th of September. And yet not a single piece of that was in the mainstream press. And when they did put it in the press about, oh, police officers were injured, no, you know, that was TSG, riot police ran into men, women and children. And we do have a right to defend ourselves using equal and opposing force. You are allowed to defend your life if someone's going to hurt you. And the police certainly shouldn't be assaulting anyone or going for the red zone, which is the head. They're not supposed to do that. But so when they reported on it in the mainstream media, they said 1,000. Well, it wasn't. So they're not telling the people the truth. They're lying. They're concealing the truth. So all of these things, eventually, you can't convince all of the people all of the time. You can convince some of the people some of the time. But I've got a lovely saying that I heard someone say, I think about 30 years ago, and it's my favourite one. If you act like a skunk, eventually someone's going to get wind of you. And that's true, you know. When, you know, they're saying about testing the entire city of Liverpool. And they say, if you consent to a test and it tests positive, instead of being locked down for 14 days, we'll lock you down for 7. Well, hang on a minute. Isn't that like a parking fine? If you pay this fine within 14 days, we will reduce it by 50%. We're talking about a deadly pandemic here. A deadly pandemic that's going to wipe mankind out, which is why they're saying that they're destroying entire families' livelihoods. They're destroying families. People have committed suicide over this. People have committed murder over this. So this deadly pandemic, they're now saying, well, actually, if you negotiate with us and you have this test, you can isolate for 7 days instead of 14.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't make sense. And there's so many things about this that don't make sense. And you don't need to convince me. I mean, for me, I'm kind of reached that stage where it's so stupid. The whole thing's so stupid. But obviously, some people still believe in this. Are you getting fatigue yourself of stating the obvious? Because it seems to be almost obvious that this is obviously to take control to create the Great Reset.
I wasn't really tired of saying it. You know, I go on the forest every day for a dog walk. What was interesting for me was the popularity. I don't want to sound like I've disappeared up my own ass. I don't mean that, but the amount of people that were following me and the amount of people that were looking to me to lead, and there's a great responsibility comes with that when I'm getting hundreds upon hundreds of emails of people saying, thank God you're there. You kept me going. I was so depressed. And when I used to do live newsreels every day on Facebook, and I used to do the Lord's Prayer at night as well, when they said, it's really kept me going. If I hadn't have had that, I was so depressed I didn't want to be here anymore. That's a huge responsibility. And I'm sure that's why I'm being very, very targeted, more than anyone else in the UK, to shut me up. But I'm tired of it. The longer it goes on, the people are getting sick of it. But classically, if you want to know what's going to happen ahead of you, always look behind you. And if you look through history, when this happens, what has to follow discontent is a tighter grip. More discontent, a tighter grip. More discontent, a much tighter grip. And then you get an explosion, which is where you'll start to see civil unrest. And then they know this, and then they plan, time to bring in the army that we've lined up. And
that's the problem, though, isn't it? Because the more people who protest, it feels like the only thing you can do in this situation is protest. But the more people that protest, eventually they'll send in the army, they'll bring in the one world government or whatever. I mean, how can we win in this situation then?
Well, first of all, they've already, London, Priti Patel, outrageous. They already sent in the TSG, which is the riot police, into men, women and children, peaceful protesters. They didn't need to do it. And they rioted themselves. They ran into the crowd. They literally ran. And then they did it the following week as well, I believe, on the 26th of September as well. So we already see that's out of control. We haven't seen the army yet, but I don't believe we have a lot of army, but I know that other countries have had it very, very severe, and they might have a little bit more lawlessness than what we have here. As for what can we do, is it lost? 5G, don't forget as well, the upper frequency of 5G is very similar to the military weapon, the Growler. And that can be fired from an aircraft or from a vehicle. And it takes out all physiological and neurological life. It's a weapon. And less frequency has been used for crowd control. Makes you feel like your skin's on fire. So this has all been put in place. So, this has been very cleverly thought out, what's happened. And it's been planned a long time ago. So they are ready for the discourse. They're ready for we've done, all the talking, all the discourse. They're ready for the uprising. They're ready for the pushback. They're ready for the civil unrest. Of course they are. But we know that. We know our enemy's plan. It's never the strongest army that win. It's the one that knew their enemy's plan. And they got organized. And everyone should read The Art of War. Please read it. If you don't want to read it, go and watch the audio version on YouTube or an abbreviated version. I was listening to how the Viet Cong didn't have half as much firepower and weapons as the Americans, but they knew the terrain, and they were underground, and they were very efficient at what they did. So, as Robin Tilbrook said, to steal his analogy, the herd runs in a direction, but in a split second, that herd can change directions. And it's going to take something that in a split second could change the direction of the people, and you'll start to see a pushback. And for every force, it's physics, there'll be an equal and opposing force. And this is, if you're Christian or you're any faith, you know that for me, we have God, Yeshua, and we have the devil, Lucifer. So God oversees everything. So this is a spiritual war as well. It's listed in all scripture. Even the Muslims will tell you that. In Quran, it's listed in scripture. So this is a spiritual war, and it's not won. It's not a done deal. For me, I pray every day, and I hope everyone will do that. Speak, and it shall be done. Ask, and it shall be done. Ask God to intervene. Ask him to show you the truth, to let you hear the truth. Ask him to give you discernment. Ask him to give you the power to speak the truth. So, I can't be quiet. It's in James, the last chapter of the book of James. When you know something to be true, it's a sin not to speak it. So I, for one, will not be dying on my knees. And I don't want to live in a new world order with a chip.
Nor do I really.
You know,
Yeah.
my social score. Oh, you've spoken out against the government.
That seems to be coming. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a great movie. I refute that in the name of Jesus Christ, our Lord, amen. It's not coming. We're not going to let it. A great movie called In Time with Justin Timberlake. I watched it years ago. I don't watch much now, but go watch it. It's literally where they want us. You're paid with a little barcode on your arm. When you work, you're paid. And everything that you buy is paid for with that barcode. And if you run out of minutes, you literally drop down dead. And you can't travel out of your zone. You can only be in your zone. So
you say it's not coming, or you don't want it to come, but it is in the Bible. So could it be inevitable?
It is. And if you look at scripture and prophecy, a lot of people will die. Now, what are they going to die of? Are they going to die because they're going to have this vaccine? Are they going to die from this non-visualized, purified and isolated rumor called COVID-19? I don't know. Are they going to die of radiation poisoning, radiation sickness? I don't know. But right now, we're in a little bit of an eye of a storm, and the storm's all around us. And every day it's unfolding. And every day where, our abusers are coming up with something new. And people really need to hold the faith, stay in the light, pray, stay with your brothers and sisters in Christ, stay with your families, your friends, your colleagues, support one another, because we're strong together on our own. It's like any herd. You're on your own, you're picked off. You're on the outskirts of the herd, you're going to be picked off. We should all be together. And that in itself is strength. And actually what I'm going to tell you now is physics. It's not hocus pocus, it's physics. The earth resonates at a certain frequency. I think it's, I might be wrong. I think, is it 27.4? I always get it the wrong way around, 27.4 or 24.7. But the point is, it resonates at a frequency. And all of the different emotions, there's a book actually that was written by a PhD, a doctorate of something, but all of these are science-based. When you are happy, when you are joyful, when you are loving, when you are giving, you resonate up to the 180, 200 hertz. When you're resentful, when you're jealous, when you're fearful, when you're angry, when you're bitter, it's 0 to 2. When your frequency is low, you get sick. That's what happens. And this is fact. This is physics. It's science. So don't be fearful. Don't be fearful. Roll with it. Plan for a rainy day, but expect sunshine.
That's probably a good note to end on. That was quite nice. Yeah. You've lost your Twitter accounts and some of your other social media accounts. Is there anywhere you'd like to direct people where they can still listen to you anywhere?
Well, I did have a website, but we just had to take it down. There will be a website in the next few weeks, and I want you to just look for, there's 2 websites actually. The Medical Revolutionaries, it's actually already there. That's Dr. Kevin Corbett and I, and it's actually to do with our work. And that's everywhere. It's going to be, you're going to see it pop up everywhere on YouTube, Brighteon, BitChute, Instagram, Facebook. It'll be on everything till it starts to get taken down, brand new tube. I'm on Brighteon, and the police have got my laptop at the moment. I've acquisitioned another.
They've got Hunter Biden's laptop as well.
Oh, God. Well, I've got, once I get my old one back, I'll be putting all my stuff on there that's on my laptop. Until then, find me on BitChute, because I will be loading up on BitChute. I am on Parler, but I never use it. But I'm going to start posting on Parler again. And just look out for me. I will have websites, and you just look for my name, Kate Sherimani, a natural nurse in a toxic world, or natural nurse. I'm also on Sons of Liberty Radio every Saturday in the UK. You can go on their website. You can go on YouTube and find them. I do a Saturday show at 12 midday Greenwich Mean Time. Do come on and join in the chat room. It's great. That's Tim Brown does it. But like I say, I am all these things. I opened another Twitter the other day from a different phone, different everything. And they found me within 6 hours. And it didn't even have my face. Didn't have my face on it. Didn't have my name on it. On a new phone, a new what do you call it? Email address. Still found me. So I'm really being targeted at the moment, but that's all right. Honestly, the truth shall prevail, and it will always come out. And if you stay by what's right, stay by what's good, stay true to the Lord, speak the truth, want justice, it always comes out in the end. I'll leave your listeners with this one. There can't be anything worse. Who remembers the Squidgygate scandal with Prince Charles and Camilla Parker Bowles, when he said he wanted to be a toiletry that a woman might use? He wished he was Camilla's. I mean, how did he survive that? But he did survive it, and he's here and married to us, so I can survive the storm. They can call me what they want. And we'll roll with it. But I can do you another update. Do you an update in a few months' time once we hear more about these fines. If you just stay in touch, I'll do you another update. Or even, get Dr. Corbett on for your friends. He's fantastic. He authored the papers, The Nazification of the NHS. Dr. Kevin Corbett, KPC Research. Follow him on Twitter. Amazing.
Okay, I'll have a look at that. It's been great talking to you, Kate. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for joining us, and hope you manage to avoid that £10,000 fine. I'm sure you will. Just throw it in the rubbish bin. Two £10,000 fines, yeah.
Well, I've actually just sent them an email. I've sent both of them an email saying I will see you in court for this unlawful, illegal fine.
Yeah, fair enough.
So thank you very much for having me on in Thailand. I haven't been to Thailand since 1998. Beautiful country.
It's getting harder. It's getting harder to come here now, isn't it?
Yeah, beautiful country, beautiful people.
It is. It's very nice. Very nice food as well over here.